My name is Emily Carter, and for most of my life, I believed that being kind meant being quiet. I believed that loving people meant tolerating them, even when they crossed lines they never should have touched. I didn't call it weakness back then. I called it peace. Looking back now, I realize I was confusing silence with strength. I was 32 years old, living in Austin, Texas, working a steady job in marketing, paying my own bills, and building what I thought was a decent life. On the surface, everything looked fine. But beneath that calm exterior was a pattern I had been repeating since childhood, letting other people decide how much of me they were allowed to take. It started with my family. I grew up in a household where emotions were treated like inconveniences. My mother believed that family harmony mattered more than individual feelings. My father avoided conflict by pretending it didn't exist. If I was hurt, I was told I was too sensitive. If I spoke up, I was accused of being dramatic. So I learned early that keeping the peace meant swallowing my discomfort. By the time I moved out, that habit had followed me into adulthood like a shadow. At work, I was the reliable one. The person who stayed late, covered shifts, and fixed problems that weren't mine. My manager praised my team spirit, but somehow promotions went to louder people. I told myself it was fine. At least I was appreciated. In my friendships, I was the listener, the helper, the emergency contact at 2 a.m. But when I needed something, responses were slow, excuses were quick, and my needs were always postponed. And then there was my family dinner, the night that quietly set everything in motion. My mother called me on a Tuesday afternoon. "Emily," she said, in that tone that sounded warm but carried an expectation. "We're having a family dinner this Saturday. I need you to come early and help set things up." I glanced at my calendar. I had planned a rare weekend for myself. Laundry, rest, maybe even nothing at all. "I can come," I said carefully, "but I can't get there early. I've had a long week." There was a pause. "Oh," she replied, disappointment dripping through the line. "Well, your cousin Rachel is coming early, and she's much busier than you." That familiar sting hit my chest. "I'll see what I can do," I said, even though I already knew what that meant. Saturday came, and like always, I showed up early. I chopped vegetables while my mother rearranged the same table settings she rearranged every holiday. My aunt commented on my weight. My uncle joked about how I was still single, as if it were a punchline. Rachel arrived an hour late and was greeted like a celebrity. "Oh, honey, you must be exhausted," my mother said, pulling her into a hug. I stood there, hands still wet from washing dishes, invisible in my own family's kitchen. At dinner, the conversation turned to money. "So, Emily," my uncle said, leaning back in his chair, "you still working that little office job?" I forced a smile. "Yes. I like what I do." He chuckled. "Marketing, right? Sounds easy." "You're lucky. Some of us actually work hard." Laughter followed. I felt my face heat up, but I said nothing. My mother didn't defend me. She just kept eating. On the drive home that night, something felt different. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just heavy. Like I had been carrying a weight for years and finally noticed how tired my arms were. I tried to ignore it. But the universe has a way of pressing the issue. The following Monday at work, my manager stopped by my desk. "Emily, I need you to take on the Peterson account," he said casually. I blinked. "Isn't that Jason's project?" "He's overwhelmed," my manager replied. "You're so good at handling pressure." I already had more work than I could manage. "I'm at capacity," I said, surprising myself. "I won't be able to give it the attention it deserves." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just do your best." Which was code for, "You don't really have a choice." That night, I sat on my couch staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from my life like scenes from a movie I suddenly didn't recognize. The times I apologized when someone else hurt me. The times I explained myself to people who never tried to understand. The times I gave more because I was afraid that asking for respect would cost me love. I realized something uncomfortable. No one had stolen my boundaries. I had been handing them out, piece by piece, hoping it would make people stay. The thought scared me. Because if I stopped doing that, who would still be there? The next day, my phone buzzed with a message from my older sister, Lauren. "Mom says you seemed distant at dinner." Did you upset her? I stared at the screen. Not are you okay? Not they were rude to you. Just concern for my mother's feelings. Something in me tightened. I'm fine, I typed. I just didn't feel respected. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then her reply came. You know how they are. It's easier if you don't take things personally. That sentence followed me all day. It's easier. For who? That evening, I took a walk around my neighborhood. The air was warm, the sky painted in soft oranges and purples. People passed by laughing, living their lives, protecting their space without apologizing for it. I realized I didn't know how to do that. But I wanted to learn. Not in a loud, dramatic way. Not by cutting people off overnight. I wanted to start small. The next morning, my manager emailed me asking for an update on the Peterson account. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Every version of my old self wanted to say, no problem. I'm on it. Instead, I took a breath. I can continue my current projects at full quality, I typed, or I can take on the Peterson account with adjusted expectations. Please let me know how you'd like to proceed. I hit send before I could change my mind. My heart raced. I half expected consequences. Anger. Punishment. What I got was silence. For the first time, I noticed something powerful. Setting a boundary didn't end the world. But it did reveal who was used to benefiting from my lack of one. That night, I wrote a list in my journal. Things I deserve. Respect without having to earn it. To say no without guilt. To take up space without apologizing. I didn't know yet how hard it would be to live by that list. I didn't know how much resistance I would face. And I definitely didn't know that the next boundary I set would trigger a chain reaction that would change my family, my career, and my understanding of myself forever. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of losing people. I was afraid of losing myself. And that fear was finally. I didn't sleep well the night after I sent that email. My phone stayed face down on the nightstand, like it might explode with consequences at any second. I kept replaying the message in my head, wondering if my tone had been too firm, too confident, too much. By morning, I almost convinced myself to send a follow-up apology. Almost. At work, my manager finally replied. Let's discuss later today, the email said. My stomach dropped. I spent the next few hours doing my regular tasks, hyper-aware of every movement around me. When noon came, he waved me into his office. Jason was already there, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, looking bored. We need to redistribute workload, my manager said. Emily raised a valid concern. Jason glanced at me surprised. Valid, he repeated. It's just temporary. I figured she wouldn't mind. There it was. Wouldn't mind. I felt the familiar urge to smooth things over. To say it was fine. To take it back. Instead, I said I do mind. Not because I don't want to help, but because my workload already exceeds my role. The room went quiet. Jason shrugged. Guess I'll handle it then. No argument. No punishment. No disaster. When I walked back to my desk, my legs felt weak, but my spine felt stronger than it ever had. That small victory didn't go unnoticed. By Friday, subtle changes had started happening. Fewer last-minute favors. Fewer assumptions that I'd stay late. It wasn't kindness, it was adjustment. People adapt when they have to. My family, however, adapted much slower. Sunday afternoon, my mother called again. Emily, she said sweetly, your aunt needs help moving next weekend. I told her you'd be available. She didn't ask. She informed. I'm not, I replied. There was a pause so long I wondered if the call had dropped. What do you mean, you're not? She finally asked. It's family. I already have plans, I said. And I wasn't asked. Her tone shifted. You're being difficult lately. That word hit harder than I expected. Difficult. The old guilt rushed in, fast and familiar. My heart pounded. My mouth went dry. I'm being clear, I said carefully. There's a difference. She sighed dramatically. After everything we've done for you. There it was. The emotional invoice. I closed my eyes. I love you, Mom. But I won't be available. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, waiting for the regret to swallow me. It didn't. What came instead was sadness, quiet, heavy sadness. Not because I had said no, but because saying no felt like betrayal in my own family. Later that evening, my sister Lauren texted, "Mom's really upset. You should call her, asterisk." I typed and erased 3 different replies before finally sending one sentence. "I'm open to talking when she's ready to respect my time." No response came. The silence stretched into days. At first, it hurt. I checked my phone more than I should have. Every notification made my chest tighten. Then something unexpected happened. The quiet gave me space. Without constant emotional demands, my mind felt clearer. I started noticing how often my anxiety had been tied to other people's expectations. Without them pressing in, I could finally hear myself think. Midweek, a coworker named Sarah stopped by my desk. "I just wanted to say," she said quietly, "I liked how you handled that meeting. I wish I could do that." I smiled. "You can." She laughed nervously. "Maybe someday." That's when I realized something important. Boundaries don't just protect you. They show others what's possible. That weekend, instead of helping my aunt move, I did something radical. Nothing. I slept in. I went for long walks. I cooked meals slowly, without rushing. I read a book just because I wanted to. No guilt. No apologies. On Sunday night, my mother finally called. "I don't recognize you lately," she said. My chest tightened, but I stayed calm. "I'm still me. You used to be more accommodating." I almost laughed. "I used to be afraid," I replied. "I'm not anymore." She was quiet. "I raised you better than this," she said. That hurt, but not the way it used to. "You raised me to be kind," I said. "Not to disappear." She didn't respond. We ended the call politely, but distant. That night, I wrote in my journal again. Things I'm learning asterisk. Asterisk discomfort is not danger. Asterisk guilt doesn't mean I'm wrong. Asterisk people who benefit from my silence will resist my voice. I didn't know how my family would react long term. What I did know was this: I was done negotiating my worth. The next test came sooner than expected. At work, a senior role opened up, one I had quietly been doing pieces of for years. My manager encouraged me to apply. Jason pulled me aside later. "You sure you want the attention?" he asked. "It changes how people see you." I smiled. That's kind of the point. I submitted the application that night. For the first time, I wasn't trying to be liked. I was trying to be honest. And somewhere deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because once you stop abandoning yourself to keep the peace, other people don't just notice. They react. And not all of them are happy about it. The promotion interview was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I told myself not to overthink it, but my body didn't listen. My shoulders stayed tense all morning, my stomach tight with a mix of hope and dread. This role wasn't just a step up, it was proof. Proof that the quiet work I had done for years mattered. But wanting something openly still felt dangerous. When I walked into the conference room, my manager and 2 directors sat across the table. They asked about strategy, leadership, conflict resolution. For the first time, I didn't shrink my answers to sound agreeable. "I address issues directly," I said. Respectfully, but clearly. One of the directors nodded. "That's important." I left the room feeling steady. That feeling didn't last. By the end of the day, whispers followed me through the office. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Jason didn't look at me once. The next morning, Sarah leaned over my cubicle wall. "Just a heads up," she said quietly. "Some people think you're changing." I smiled thinly. "I hope so." She hesitated. "Not everyone means it nicely." I knew that already. At lunch, I overheard Jason talking near the break room. "She thinks she's management now," he said. "Ever since she started saying no, she's been acting superior." I froze. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something I was starting to understand. When you stop being useful, people rewrite the story. That weekend, my family decided to rewrite mine too. I found out through a Facebook post. A picture of my aunt smiling beside a caption, "Family always shows up." The comments were full of praise. No mention of who hadn't. My phone buzzed. "Lauren. Asterisk, you really embarrassed Mom. Everyone noticed you weren't there. Asterisk." I stared at the message, my chest tight. I said I wasn't available, I replied. That shouldn't be embarrassing. She called immediately. What happened to you? Lauren demanded. You used to care about this family. I still do, I said calmly. I just care about myself too. She scoffed. You're being selfish. That word again. I took a breath. Setting limits isn't selfish. Tell that to Mom, she snapped. She's been crying all week. The guilt tried to sink its claws into me. I didn't let it. I'm sorry she's upset, I said. But I'm not responsible for managing her emotions. Lauren went quiet. You sound cold, she finally said. I hung up shaking. Not from fear, but from the effort it took not to give in. That night, I dreamed I was standing in the middle of a room with everyone I loved pulling at me from different directions. Every time I let go of one hand, someone accused me of abandoning them. I woke up exhausted. On Monday morning, my manager called me into his office. We've received some feedback, he said carefully. My heart sank. About my performance? I asked. About your attitude, he replied. I straightened. Can you be specific? He shifted uncomfortably. Some team members feel you're less flexible. I nodded slowly. I'm more clear. He studied me. Is there a reason for the change? Yes, I said. I was burning out. He leaned back. Burnout happens to everyone. Not equally, I replied. And not without consequences. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he said, we value you here. Just be mindful of how you come across. I left his office with my hands trembling. This was the part no one warned me about. Setting boundaries didn't just upset people who benefited from my silence. It threatened systems built on it. That evening, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. We need to talk, she said. I stepped aside. She didn't sit. She paced. I didn't raise you to treat family like strangers, she said. People are talking. I met her gaze. About what? I didn't raise you to treat family like strangers, she said. People are talking. I met her gaze. About what? About how you've changed. How you don't help anymore. I still help, I said. When I'm asked. When I can. She shook her head. You used to do things without being asked. I swallowed. That's the problem. Her eyes flashed. So now we have to walk on eggshells around you? No, I replied softly. You just have to respect my answer. She laughed bitterly. Respect goes both ways. I agree, I said. That's why I need boundaries. She stopped pacing. So this is it? She asked. You're choosing yourself over us? The room felt unbearably quiet. I'm choosing myself with you, I said. If you're willing. Her expression hardened. If you keep this up, she said, don't be surprised if people pull away. I felt the old fear rise. I let it pass. If they do, I said, then I'll know who loved me conditionally. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. When she left, I cried. Not because I regretted my words, but because I finally understood the cost of being honest. The next day, HR sent a calendar invite regarding the senior role decision. My pulse quickened. In the meeting, my manager cleared his throat. We've decided to move forward with another candidate, he said. My heart dropped. However, he continued, we want you to know your interview was strong. This decision wasn't about capability. I nodded, numb. As I walked back to my desk, Jason smirked. It stung, but not the way it used to. That night, I sat alone with my journal. Things I'm facing asterisk. Asterisk being misunderstood. Asterisk being judged. Asterisk being tested. I added one more line. But also asterisk. Asterisk being free. I didn't get the promotion. My family was distant. My workplace was tense. Yet somehow, beneath all of it, I felt more grounded than ever. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove my worth. I was protecting it.